Damascus, February 13, 2008, 9:30 p.m. A silver Mitsubishi Pajero glides through the diplomatic quarter, headlights cutting through winter drizzle. Inside, Imad Mughniya, architect of the Marine barracks bombing, mastermind behind hostage crises across 3 decades, the man Israel spent 26 years hunting. He's unarmed, no security detail, violating every protocol that kept him invisible since 1983. He parks near the Iranian Cultural Center, steps onto the pavement. 50 meters away, a technical surveillance team watches through thermal optics. They've been rotating positions for 11 days, tracking his pattern, waiting for this exact convergence of location and isolation. The device is already in place. Magnetic mount, headrest position, tested 25 times in a pine forest outside Fort Bragg to contain the blast radius to 30 inches. Mughniya's hand reaches for the driver's door. The team's communications go silent. One question remains. Did the compartmentalization hold, or does Syrian intelligence already know they're burned? Drop a comment. Would you burn an entire network to take one target off the board? Now rewind. By 2007, Imad Mughniya had become an operational ghost story. No confirmed photographs since 1983, no intercepted communications, no travel documents. He moved through Damascus, Beirut, and Tehran, using a rotation of safe houses that changed every 72 hours. Western intelligence agencies maintained physical description files based on surgical reconstruction analysis and aging software, but positive identification remained theoretical. He had survived 4 assassination attempts by Israeli intelligence, each failure forcing Mossad to accept an uncomfortable reality. Mughniya operated under state protection so layered that conventional targeting was impossible. His operational resume made him the most wanted terrorist in CIA files. The Beirut Marine barracks bombing in October 1983 killed 241 American servicemen. The embassy annex attack 13 months later killed 2 more. He orchestrated the hijacking of TWA Flight 847, personally executing Navy diver Robert Stetham and dumping his body onto the Beirut tarmac. He masterminded the kidnapping and torture murder of CIA Station Chief William Buckley, the Khobar Towers bombing that killed 19 Air Force personnel, and the AMIA bombing in Buenos Aires that killed 85. Each operation demonstrated sophisticated planning, precise execution, and total disregard for diplomatic consequence. For the United States, Mughniya represented more than historical grievance. By 2007, intelligence reporting indicated he was restructuring Hezbollah's International Operations Division, training operatives in advanced tactics, and coordinating with Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps units. Signals intelligence suggested he was planning attacks against American interests in Iraq, where Hezbollah supplied explosively formed penetrators were shredding armored vehicles. The threat was immediate. The legal authority to act was not. American law prohibited assassination as a tool of foreign policy since Gerald Ford's Executive Order 11905 in 1976. Every targeted killing required a specific finding. The target must pose an imminent threat, capture must be unfeasible, and collateral damage must be minimized. Previous attempts to authorize action against Mughniya had stalled in legal review. The Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel demanded evidence of active planning, not historical culpability. The intelligence community could prove what Mughniya had done. Proving what he would do next required penetration of Hezbollah's command structure, and that network had remained impenetrable for 2 decades. Israel faced no such legal constraint, but carried different operational limitations. Mossad maintained surveillance assets across the Middle East, but Damascus presented unique challenges. The Syrian capital functioned as a controlled environment where regime security services monitored foreign nationals, tracked vehicles, and ran aggressive counterintelligence operations. Any Israeli operation inside Syria risked exposure, capture of personnel, and regional escalation. Previous attempts to target Mughniya in Damascus had been aborted when surveillance detected Syrian intelligence presence near staging areas. The window for action measured in minutes, the preparation time measured in months. The math didn't work. Then, in early 2007, intelligence reporting shifted. A Mossad asset inside Lebanese Hezbollah provided pattern-of-life data suggesting Mughniya was making regular visits to Damascus, spending extended periods at specific locations in the diplomatic quarter. The asset couldn't provide exact schedules, but confirmed Mougnier felt secure enough in Syria to relax operational security. He was meeting with Iranian Revolutionary Guard officers, coordinating with Palestinian Islamic Jihad representatives, and maintaining contact with Syrian intelligence handlers. The asset provided vehicle descriptions, partial route information, and behavioral indicators. It was incomplete. It was also the most detailed intelligence on Mougnier's movements in 24 years. Mossad Director Meir Dagan brought the intelligence to CIA leadership in spring 2007. The proposal was direct. Israel would handle surveillance, targeting, and device construction. The United States would provide technical assistance in explosive engineering and political authorization. The operation would be deniable for both parties. No American personnel would enter Syria. No Israeli fingerprints would appear on the device. The blast signature would resemble commercial explosives available across the region. If the operation failed, both governments would deny involvement. If it succeeded, the same denials would apply. The legal architecture took months to construct. White House counsel and the Office of Legal Counsel drafted a classified finding that designated Mougnier as an imminent threat based on intelligence reporting of active operational planning. The finding authorized CIA support to a foreign intelligence service conducting operations against the designated target. It did not explicitly name Israel. It did not specify the method. Attorney General Michael Mukasey, Director of National Intelligence Mike McConnell, and National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley reviewed the language. Each signed off on different aspects: legal authority, intelligence validity, strategic necessity. In November 2007, President George W. Bush approved the finding. The authorization was narrow, technical assistance only, no American operational role, maximum effort to minimize collateral casualties. The device design began at a CIA facility in North Carolina. Engineers worked with a specific constraint. The explosion must be contained to the vehicle's interior, with minimal fragmentation beyond 30 inches from point of detonation. This eliminated conventional car bombs, which relied on high explosive charges that produced massive overpressure and shrapnel. Instead, engineers developed a shaped charge using C4 explosive in a precise configuration, mounted inside the headrest of the driver's seat. The charge would direct energy forward and downward, killing the occupant while leaving the vehicle's frame largely intact. Surrounding pedestrians, even those standing within 10 feet of the vehicle, would survive. The testing protocol was extensive: 25 detonations using identical vehicle models, identical explosive configurations, identical mounting positions. Each test measured blast pressure, fragmentation patterns, thermal signature, and audio profile. Engineers adjusted charge weight, casing material, and positioning until the results matched requirements. The final device weighed less than 2 pounds, could be installed in under 90 seconds, and would be triggered remotely using a modified car alarm receiver. The technology was simple enough to be sourced commercially. The engineering was sophisticated enough to require months of testing. Mossad provided the operational plan. Surveillance teams would rotate through Damascus using commercial cover, tracking Mougnier's movements and identifying patterns. Once a predictable routine emerged, a technical team would gain access to his vehicle, install the device, and extract before Syrian counterintelligence detected presence. The trigger team would maintain line of sight from a separate location, confirming target identification before initiating detonation. The entire sequence from device installation to execution would take no more than 14 days. Longer exposure increased detection risk exponentially. The surveillance phase began in late December 2007. Mossad assets entered Syria using Canadian and European passports, posing as businessmen, journalists, and NGO workers. They operated in pairs, maintained separate accommodations, and never made contact in public spaces. Communication ran through encrypted satellite phones, programmed to self-delete message logs. Each team member carried secondary documentation and extraction plans in case Syrian intelligence initiated surveillance. The operational security was absolute because the cost of compromise was capture, interrogation, and execution. By mid-January 2008, the pattern emerged. Mougnier was visiting a specific apartment building in the Kafr Sousa diplomatic quarter every 4 to 6 days, arriving between 8:30 and 9 p.m., staying approximately 90 minutes. then departing alone in his silver Pajero. He parked on the street rather than in secured areas. He carried no visible security detail. The behavior suggested he felt protected by Syrian state security and Iranian diplomatic presence. The arrogance was operational opportunity. The technical team received authorization to proceed on February 10th. 2 operatives entered Damascus, carrying the device components in separate commercial electronics shipments, pre-cleared through Lebanese customs to avoid Syrian inspection. They assembled the device in a rented apartment 3 kilometers from the target zone, tested the trigger mechanism, and prepared insertion tools. The plan required accessing Mughnieh's vehicle while it was parked and unattended, installing the device, and withdrawing before building security or passing patrols detected activity. The window measured approximately 6 to 9 minutes based on Mughnieh's established pattern. February 13th, 7 p.m. Surveillance confirms Mughnieh's Pajero entering the target area. He parks on Rue George Haddad near the Iranian Cultural Center, exits alone, and enters the building. The technical team moves into position 2 blocks away. Radio discipline is absolute. The trigger team occupies an apartment with direct sight lines to the vehicle. They carry identification as Syrian businessmen. If questioned, they will claim to be waiting for a real estate contact. The cover story has been rehearsed 50 times. 8:40 p.m. The technical team approaches the Pajero on foot, carrying a leather briefcase containing installation tools and the device. One operative works, the other provides counter-surveillance watch. The device slides into the headrest mount, secured with industrial adhesive and magnetic backing. The receiver connects to the vehicle's electrical system, drawing minimal current to avoid detection. Installation time: 4 minutes, 20 seconds. They withdraw on foot, separating at the first intersection, moving toward extraction points 1 kilometer apart. 9:31 p.m. Mughnieh exits the building. He walks to the Pajero alone, scanning the street out of habit, but detecting nothing unusual. The surveillance team confirms identity through thermal optics and facial recognition software. Positive identification requires 3 separate confirmations. They have 4. He opens the driver's door, settles into the seat. His hand reaches for the ignition. The trigger team has a 2-second window to abort if civilians enter the blast radius. The street is empty. One operator's thumb rests on the transmit button. The other performs final visual sweep. No civilians, no obstructions. Mughnieh's face is visible through the windshield. The operator presses transmit. The explosion is surgical. The shaped charge detonates with a sharp crack rather than a roar, the sound contained within the vehicle's frame. Windows shatter outward in a controlled pattern, glass fragments falling straight down rather than projecting laterally. The driver's compartment fills with white-hot pressure for 0.3 of a second, then vents through blown-out windows. Pedestrians 15 feet away feel the concussion as a chest thump, but remain standing. The Pajero's frame stays intact, tires still inflated, engine block undamaged. Only the interior shows catastrophic damage. Mughnieh dies instantly, body shielded from external view by the vehicle's structure. Syrian emergency services arrive within 4 minutes. Fire crews extinguish small flames in the upholstery. Police cordon off a 30-meter perimeter. Intelligence officers appear within 12 minutes, moving with purpose rather than confusion. They photograph the blast pattern, document the headrest mounting point, collect fragments. One officer examines the receiver unit, still partially attached to the vehicle's electrical system. He makes a phone call. Within 20 minutes, Syrian security forces begin sweeping the diplomatic quarter, checking hotel registries, pulling CCTV footage from nearby buildings. The trigger team is already moving. They exit through separate stairwells, leaving the apartment exactly as they found it. No fingerprints, no biological traces, no surveillance equipment. They walk to pre-positioned vehicles 3 blocks apart, drive to different sectors of Damascus, abandon the vehicles in commercial parking areas. By midnight, they're across the Lebanese border, using separate routes, different documentation, non-overlapping timelines. The technical team follows 40 minutes later, traveling through Jordan rather than Lebanon. By dawn on February 14th, all Israeli operatives are outside Syrian territory. The cover story collapses within 18 hours. Syrian intelligence pulls footage from a camera positioned 80 meters from the blast site. The angle is oblique, the lighting poor, But the sequence is clear. Two men approach the Pajero. One works while the other watches. Both withdraw on foot. The footage doesn't provide facial identification, but it proves the explosion was an assassination, not an accident. Syrian officials brief Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders by midday on February 14th. The Iranians demand answers. Hezbollah leadership in Beirut goes into lockdown, moving senior commanders to secure facilities, shutting down communication networks, initiating internal security reviews. Israel maintains absolute silence. No government official comments. No intelligence source leaks details. The operational discipline holds because everyone involved understands the cost of acknowledgement. Syria could demand UN Security Council action. Iran could authorize retaliatory strikes against Israeli diplomatic facilities. Hezbollah could launch rocket attacks across the Lebanese border. Silence creates ambiguity. Ambiguity limits response options. The United States also remains silent, but the compartmentalization faces immediate stress. Washington Post reporters begin making inquiries within 72 hours of the explosion, citing anonymous intelligence sources who claim American involvement. The White House press office issues a standard denial. The United States does not comment on intelligence matters. Behind closed doors, the Office of Legal Counsel reviews whether the operation stayed within authorized parameters. The findings specified technical assistance and minimal collateral damage. Both conditions were met. But the finding didn't anticipate the political exposure that would come if American involvement became public. CIA leadership faces a different problem. The operation's success creates pressure to replicate the model. Within weeks, proposals emerge for similar operations against other high-value targets in Syria, Lebanon, and Iran. Each proposal cites the Mughniya operation as proof of concept. Each assumes the same level of intelligence access, the same operational security, the same political authorization. None acknowledge the reality. The Mughniya operation succeeded because of a specific intelligence breakthrough that took 2 years to develop and can't be duplicated on demand. Hezbollah's response begins with internal purges. Security officers interrogate personnel who had contact with Mughniya in the weeks before his death. They review communication logs, travel records, financial transactions. They're looking for the penetration that gave Israel pattern-of-life data. The investigation focuses on Lebanese nationals with access to senior leadership, individuals who traveled to Damascus, anyone who displayed behavior inconsistent with their role. 3 mid-level operatives disappear in March 2008. Hezbollah never confirms their fate. Sources in Lebanese intelligence suggest they were executed after interrogation revealed suspicious contact patterns. The operational fallout extends beyond Hezbollah. Palestinian Islamic Jihad severs direct coordination with Syrian intelligence, moving meetings to Tehran and Doha. Iranian Revolutionary Guard officers reduce their visibility in Damascus, conducting more business through secure video links rather than face-to-face meetings. The entire resistance axis architecture shifts toward compartmentalization and reduced exposure. The unintended consequence: it becomes harder for Western intelligence to track leadership movements and predict operational planning. Israel treats the operation as vindication of long-term persistence. Mossad spent 26 years tracking Mughniya, maintaining assets in hostile territory, waiting for the convergence of opportunity and capability. The success reinforces organizational culture around patient intelligence development rather than hasty action. But it also reveals a structural dependency. Israeli intelligence can identify and track targets in neighboring countries, but executing strikes in Syrian territory requires either massive military operations or covert partnerships that create political exposure. The CIA's technical assistance creates its own legacy. The device design becomes a template for future operations, refined and adapted for different scenarios. Engineers continue testing variations, exploring different trigger mechanisms, adjusting blast profiles for specific operational requirements. The testing facility in North Carolina expands its mandate, running simulations for operations that may never receive political authorization, but need technical solutions ready if authorization comes. By March 2008, Washington Post reporters have confirmed enough details to publish. Their sources describe American involvement in device design and testing, though specific technical details remain classified. The story breaks on February 1st, 2011, nearly 3 years after the operation. The timing is deliberate, enough distance from the event to reduce immediate retaliation risk, but recent enough to generate policy debate about targeted killing authorities and covert action oversight. The publication forces a partial acknowledgement. Former intelligence officials, speaking anonymously, confirm the operation's basic parameters without discussing specific technical methods or operational details. They emphasize the legal review process, the presidential authorization, the constraint on collateral damage. They describe Mugniya as an imminent threat based on intelligence of active operational planning. They don't specify what that planning entailed or when it would have been executed. Hezbollah responds with threats rather than immediate action. Hassan Nasrallah, speaking from a secure location via video link, promises retaliation against Israeli interests worldwide. The threats are specific: kidnapping Israeli diplomats, bombing Jewish community centers, attacking Israeli tourists in third countries. Some materialize. In July 2012, a Hezbollah operative bombs a tourist bus in Burgas, Bulgaria, killing 5 Israelis and a Bulgarian driver. Israeli intelligence connects the attack directly to revenge for Mugniya's death. The retaliation took 4 years to plan and execute, demonstrating Hezbollah's patient approach to operational planning. The legal architecture created for the Mugniya operation becomes precedent for future targeted killings. The Obama administration expands the framework, using similar legal findings to authorize drone strikes against American citizens affiliated with al-Qaeda in Yemen. The Trump administration further expands authorities, conducting the Qasem Soleimani strike in Baghdad in January 2020, using parallel legal reasoning: imminent threat, unfeasible capture, minimized collateral damage. Each operation cites the Mugniya precedent without acknowledging it directly. The intelligence breakthrough that made the operation possible remains classified. Mossad never reveals the identity of the asset who provided Mugniya's pattern of life data. The asset either remains in place, providing continued intelligence on Hezbollah operations, or was extracted after the operation to prevent exposure. Lebanese security services continue hunting for the penetration, running periodic security reviews, monitoring personnel with access to sensitive information. The paranoia creates operational friction within Hezbollah, slowing decision-making and reducing coordination efficiency. Syrian intelligence draws its own conclusions. The operation demonstrated that Damascus isn't a sanctuary, despite Syrian state protection. Iranian Revolutionary Guard officers reduced their footprint in Syria, conducting more coordination through secure communications rather than physical presence. The shift complicates Israeli intelligence collection, but also reduces the target-rich environment that Damascus represented in 2007. The device itself disappears into intelligence mythology. No photographs exist in open sources. No technical specifications leak through journalistic reporting. Engineers who worked on the design remain bound by security clearances and non-disclosure agreements. The only evidence of the device's sophistication appears in the blast pattern analysis. Contained interior damage, minimal external fragmentation, precise energy direction. Forensic experts studying the aftermath recognize professional engineering, but can't reverse engineer the specific configuration. For the surveillance teams who operated in Damascus, the operation becomes a career-defining moment. They functioned in hostile territory for 11 days, maintained operational security under Syrian counterintelligence scrutiny, and extracted without compromise. The success validates years of training in surveillance detection, cover maintenance, and operational discipline. But it also establishes an unrealistic standard. Future operations will be judged against the Mugniya benchmark, even when intelligence access and operational conditions don't match. The political cost emerges slowly. In 2011, when details become public, Syria uses the revelation to justify expanding cooperation with Iran and Hezbollah. President Bashar al-Assad frames the assassination as proof that Israel and the United States treat Syrian sovereignty as negotiable. The rhetoric plays to domestic and regional audiences, reinforcing the resistance axis narrative. Whether Assad actually believed Damascus was a sanctuary before February 2008 remains unclear. What's certain, The operation gave him political cover to deepen ties with actors the United States wanted him to distance himself from. Iran's response is more calculated. Revolutionary Guard commanders study the operation's mechanics, identifying vulnerabilities in their own security protocols. They reduce predictable patterns, increase security details, avoid using personal vehicles. The defensive measures make future targeting more difficult, but don't eliminate the possibility. Israeli intelligence continues tracking Iranian commanders, waiting for the next convergence of opportunity and authorization. Hezbollah undergoes the most significant transformation. The organization compartmentalizes operations, reducing the number of personnel with access to senior leadership movements. Communications go dark, with commanders avoiding electronic devices and relying on couriers for sensitive messages. The security improvements make the organization more resilient, but also less agile. Operational planning slows. Coordination with Palestinian groups becomes more difficult. The ghost of Mubniya shapes organizational behavior long after his death. The question that haunts intelligence analysts: was the tactical success worth the strategic cost? Mubniya's death removed a highly capable operational planner, but it didn't dismantle Hezbollah's international operations capability. His successors adopted his methods, learned from his mistakes, and continued developing attack plans. The organization's rocket arsenal expanded, its presence in Syria strengthened, its coordination with Iran deepened. The assassination achieved its immediate objective, but didn't produce the broader degradation of capability that some analysts predicted. The operational lessons spread through intelligence communities without formal acknowledgement. Training programs incorporate Damascus-style surveillance detection routes. Cover construction becomes more sophisticated, with operatives maintaining legends for months before deployment. Device engineering focuses on precision and containment rather than raw, destructive power. The Mubniya operation becomes a teaching case without ever being officially discussed, its methods absorbed through careful study of what worked and what created exposure. The technical surveillance footage from Damascus becomes a case study in counterintelligence failure. Syrian security services had cameras positioned throughout the diplomatic quarter, yet they failed to detect the technical team's approach or the installation sequence in real time. The failure reveals a gap between surveillance infrastructure and analytical capacity. Having cameras doesn't guarantee detection if no one is monitoring feeds in real time, or if operators don't recognize hostile activity when it appears. Syrian intelligence upgrades monitoring protocols after February 2008, hiring more analysts and implementing pattern recognition software. The improvements come too late to prevent the assassination, but complicate future Israeli operations. Mossad's asset network in Lebanon faces immediate pressure after Mubniya's death. Hezbollah security officers assume the intelligence came from internal penetration, and they're correct. The challenge: identifying which of several hundred potential sources provided the specific pattern of life data. Hezbollah lacks the technical sophistication to run comprehensive signals intelligence on all suspects, so they rely on behavioral analysis and interrogation. They're looking for inconsistencies, unexplained absences, financial irregularities, or communication with known Israeli contacts. The investigation creates a climate of suspicion that persists for years, degrading organizational cohesion. Israeli intelligence maintains the asset in place through sophisticated compartmentalization. The source never had direct contact with Israeli handlers inside Lebanon. All communication ran through dead drops in third countries, with months-long gaps between contacts. Financial compensation was structured to avoid traceable transactions. The legend supporting the source's access to Hezbollah leadership was authentic, built over years rather than fabricated for operational convenience. When Hezbollah security reviewed the source's record, they found nothing inconsistent with loyalty and operational security. The asset survived the purge and continued reporting until at least 2012, though later intelligence suggests either extraction or compromise after that point. The CIA's role remains classified in official documents, but the operational reality leaks through intelligence community discussions. American technical expertise provided the precision that made the operation politically viable. Without the shaped charge design and blast containment, any attempt to kill Mubniya would have risked civilian casualties that neither Israel nor the United States could accept. The The civilian protection constraint wasn't humanitarian sentiment, it was operational necessity. A car bomb that killed Syrian civilians would have triggered immediate diplomatic crisis and regional escalation. The device engineering allowed deniability through precision. Within the CIA, the operation creates internal debate about the boundary between technical assistance and operational participation. Some officers argue that designing and testing the device constitutes direct involvement in the killing, regardless of who installed it or triggered the detonation. Others maintain that technical support falls within authorized covert action, as long as American personnel don't enter the operational theater. The debate never reaches public forums, but it shapes internal guidelines for future partnerships with foreign intelligence services. Hezbollah's response planning takes longer than Israeli intelligence anticipates. Most analysts expect retaliation within 6 to 12 months, assuming Hezbollah will prioritize demonstrating capability over operational security. Instead, Hezbollah takes 4 years to prepare the Barracks bombing, conducting multiple surveillance operations, building redundant networks, and developing cover stories that withstand Bulgarian security service scrutiny. The patience demonstrates organizational discipline and strategic thinking. They're willing to sacrifice immediate revenge for higher probability of success. The Barracks attack in July 2012 targets Israeli tourists boarding a bus at Barracks Airport in Bulgaria. The bomber, using a Michigan driver's license and wearing a wig to alter appearance, detonates explosives packed in a backpack. 5 Israelis die, along with the Bulgarian bus driver. 42 people are injured. Bulgarian authorities initially struggle to identify the bomber, whose body is fragmented by the explosion. Subsequent investigation, supported by Israeli and American intelligence, traces the operation to Hezbollah operatives who conducted surveillance of Israeli tourist patterns for 18 months before the attack. Israeli intelligence confirms the link between Barracks and Mugniye through signals intelligence and human sources inside Hezbollah. The operation was explicitly authorized as retaliation, with Hassan Nasrallah personally approving the target selection and timing. The 4-year gap between assassination and retaliation reflects Hezbollah's calculation. Immediate response would have been expected, and therefore easier to interdict. Delayed retaliation, carefully planned and patiently executed, achieved tactical surprise despite strategic inevitability. The Barracks bombing validates concerns within American intelligence about blowback from the Mugniye operation. Hezbollah demonstrated willingness to strike targets far from the Middle East, using sophisticated surveillance and planning to overcome security measures. The attack doesn't just kill Israelis, it establishes that Hezbollah can operate in European Union territory, despite aggressive counterterrorism efforts. Bulgarian security services had no indication the attack was coming. Neither did Israeli protective details traveling with tourist groups. The intelligence failure exposes gaps in threat assessment and surveillance detection. European governments respond by increasing scrutiny of Hezbollah activities on their territory, but the response is inconsistent. Some countries designate Hezbollah's military wing as a terrorist organization, while maintaining diplomatic contact with political representatives. Others resist classification, arguing that Hezbollah plays a legitimate role in Lebanese politics. The fragmented approach creates operational space for Hezbollah to maintain financial networks, recruitment pipelines, and logistics support across Europe. Israeli intelligence identifies multiple cells operating in France, Germany, Belgium, and Denmark between 2012 and 2016. The Mugniye assassination's strategic impact becomes clearer over time. Hezbollah's operational capability doesn't decline, it adapts. The organization develops more sophisticated counter-surveillance techniques, implements stricter compartmentalization, and reduces digital communications in favor of courier networks. These adaptations make intelligence collection more difficult for Western agencies. Signals intelligence becomes less productive. Human intelligence requires longer development timelines. The operational environment becomes more opaque, precisely because the Mugniye operation demonstrated vulnerability. Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders draw similar lessons. After Mugniye's death, Qasem Soleimani reduces his profile in Syria and Iraq, operating through subordinate commanders and avoiding predictable patterns. He maintains operational effectiveness while minimizing exposure, at least until January 2020, when he miscalculates American willingness to conduct a strike at Baghdad International Airport. The Soleimani assassination uses the same legal framework developed for Mugniye: imminent threat finding, presidential authorization, precision strike to minimize collateral damage. The operational similarities suggest institutional learning within American intelligence about how to structure targeted killing operations for legal defensibility. The Damascus operation creates precedent for extraterritorial action that extends beyond counterterrorism. If American intelligence can support Israeli operations in Syrian territory based on imminent threat findings, the same logic applies to other hostile environments where capture is unfeasible. The framework gets adapted for operations in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, and Libya. Each operation requires fresh legal review and presidential authorization, but the basic structure remains consistent. Designate the target as an imminent threat. Demonstrate that capture isn't viable. Engineer the strike to minimize civilian casualties. Maintain deniability through operational compartmentalization. Critics within the intelligence community argue that the framework invites mission creep. The definition of imminent threat expands from individuals actively planning attacks to those who pose generalized danger based on historical activity and current position. The requirement that capture be unfeasible becomes pro forma. If the target is in hostile territory, capture is by definition impractical. The constraint on collateral damage remains meaningful, but gets interpreted through increasingly permissive targeting rules. The Mugniye precedent, initially seen as narrowly applicable, becomes a template for operations that stretch beyond its original justification. Hezbollah's institutional memory of the assassination shapes its approach to protecting current leadership. Hassan Nasrallah hasn't appeared in public since 2006, conducting all speeches via pre-recorded video from secure locations. The organization rotates leadership meetings through multiple facilities, uses counter-surveillance teams to detect hostile intelligence presence, and maintains strict protocols around communication security. These measures make targeting extremely difficult, but don't eliminate the possibility. Israeli intelligence continues developing options, waiting for the intelligence breakthrough and political authorization that would enable another Damascus-style operation. The cost of Mugniye's operational planning becomes fully apparent only after his death, when intelligence agencies pieced together his activities in the months before February 2008. Signals intelligence and human sources reveal he was coordinating Hezbollah support for Shia militias in Iraq, specifically advising on explosively formed penetrator construction. These devices were killing American soldiers at an accelerating rate in late 2007 and early 2008. The imminent threat finding that authorized American support for the assassination was based partly on this intelligence. Removing Mugniye disrupted the coordination temporarily, though Iranian Revolutionary Guard officers eventually filled the gap. The disruption bought time, but didn't solve the strategic problem. Iran and its proxies were targeting American forces in Iraq, and killing individual commanders didn't change the underlying policy. The Bush administration understood this limitation, but authorized the Mugniye operation anyway, calculating that removing a highly capable operational planner would degrade enemy effectiveness, even if it didn't eliminate the threat entirely. The calculation proved partially correct. EFP attacks continued, but became less sophisticated after Mugniye's death, suggesting his expertise wasn't easily replaced. Syrian intelligence never publicly acknowledges how Israeli operatives penetrated Damascus security to conduct the assassination. Privately, security officials conduct extensive reviews of their procedures, identifying multiple failures: inadequate real-time monitoring of surveillance cameras, insufficient counter-surveillance in the diplomatic quarter, poor coordination between different security agencies, and overconfidence that Syrian state protection deterred Israeli action. The failures are systemic rather than individual, reflecting organizational culture that prioritized monitoring domestic dissidents over defending against sophisticated foreign intelligence operations. The broader lesson for intelligence services worldwide: sanctuary is an illusion when adversaries possess sufficient capability and motivation. Damascus was supposed to be protected by Syrian security, Iranian presence, and the risk of regional escalation. Those deterrents failed because Israel calculated that removing Mugnieh was worth the potential consequences, and the United States agreed. Future targets in seemingly secure locations, Tehran, Doha, Caracas, understand that protection isn't absolute. The understanding changes behavior, forcing targets to invest more resources in security and reducing their operational effectiveness. The February 2008 assassination remains classified in Israeli records, with no official acknowledgement of responsibility. Intelligence officials privately described the operation as one of Mossad's most significant successes, comparable to the Adolf Eichmann capture and the Entebbe hostage rescue. The comparison reveals how Israeli intelligence culture values patient intelligence development, precise execution, and minimized casualties. These values sometimes create operational constraints that reduce flexibility, but they also produce outcomes that are defensible in domestic and international forums. American intelligence draws different lessons from the same operation. The CIA values the technical innovation and successful partnership with a foreign service, but analysts worry about the political exposure that came when details leaked years later. The preference within American intelligence is for operations that remain completely deniable, with no forensic evidence linking back to American involvement. The Mugnieh operation left technical signatures that investigative journalists eventually traced, creating political complications that persist years after the fact. The device that killed Mugnieh represents a specific moment in targeted killing technology, precise enough to limit collateral damage, simple enough to install quickly, sophisticated enough to defeat vehicle security systems. By 2015, intelligence agencies are developing even more refined systems. Drone-delivered munitions with facial recognition targeting, cyber weapons that compromise vehicle control systems, poisoning methods that mimic natural death. The technological progression makes attribution harder and deniability more credible. But it also creates new legal and ethical questions about the boundary between warfare and assassination. Hezbollah's investigation into the Damascus operation continues intermittently for years, with periodic security reviews targeting personnel who had access to Mugnieh's movements or contact with external entities. The organization never publicly identifies the source of the intelligence leak, suggesting either that the penetration was too well protected to uncover, or that Hezbollah leadership chose not to acknowledge the breach to avoid admitting vulnerability. Intelligence services worldwide study the case as an example of how asset protection, through compartmentalization, can defeat even aggressive counterintelligence investigations. The political aftermath in Washington unfolds slowly. When the Washington Post publishes details in 2011, some members of Congress demand hearings on targeted killing authorities and oversight of covert action. The Obama administration resists, arguing that public discussion would compromise intelligence methods and ongoing operations. The debate produces modest reforms, enhanced reporting requirements to intelligence committees, more detailed legal reviews before operations, and guidelines on civilian casualty thresholds. These changes don't prevent future targeted killings, but create more bureaucratic friction in the authorization process. Israel faces no comparable political scrutiny because the operation remains officially unacknowledged. Mossad doesn't testify before parliamentary committees about operational details. Israeli courts don't review targeted killing decisions. The lack of transparency creates operational flexibility, but also eliminates formal accountability mechanisms. Critics argue this enables operations that might not survive legal or ethical review. Defenders maintain that intelligence operations require secrecy to succeed, and that democratic accountability comes through elected oversight of intelligence leadership, not public disclosure of methods. The Damascus surveillance teams who tracked Mugnieh before the assassination face their own aftermath. Operating in hostile territory for extended periods creates psychological stress that doesn't immediately manifest. Some operatives develop hypervigilance that persists years after the mission ends. Others struggle with the gap between the operation's tactical precision and its strategic ambiguity. Mugnieh is dead, but Hezbollah remains capable. Iranian influence continues expanding, and the regional security environment deteriorates rather than improves. The personal cost of intelligence work rarely appears in operational after-action reviews. Moghnia's family pursues compensation through Lebanese courts, filing wrongful death claims against Israel and unnamed parties. The legal proceedings go nowhere. Israeli officials don't appear, Syrian witnesses provide no testimony, and evidence remains classified. The cases serve primarily as political statements rather than genuine legal recourse. Hezbollah uses the proceedings to reinforce narratives about Israeli aggression and Western complicity, though the propaganda value diminishes over time as regional conflicts shift attention to Syria's civil war and the Islamic State's emergence. The CIA facility in North Carolina, where engineers tested the device, continues operating, though its mission expands beyond explosive engineering. By 2015, the facility is developing cyber tools for disabling vehicle systems, testing chemical compounds for covert poisoning, and experimenting with directed energy weapons for non-lethal incapacitation. The evolution reflects changing intelligence priorities and advancing technology, but the core mission remains constant, developing methods for targeting individuals while maintaining deniability and minimizing collateral impact. Iranian intelligence conducts its own investigation into the Damascus operation, focusing less on identifying the human source and more on understanding technical methods. Revolutionary Guard engineers examine blast patterns, study vehicle security systems, and develop countermeasures. By 2010, senior Iranian commanders are traveling in armored vehicles with electronic countermeasure systems, designed to detect and jam remote detonation signals. The defensive measures add cost and complexity to protection details, but reflect Iranian assessment that Israel will attempt similar operations against Iranian targets. That assessment proves correct. In 2010 and 2012, nuclear scientists are killed in Tehran using magnetic bombs attached to vehicles by motorcycle-borne operatives. The methods differ from the Damascus operation. Assassins install devices in traffic rather than while vehicles are parked, but the precision and minimal collateral damage suggest similar engineering principles. Iran blames Israel. Israel doesn't respond. The pattern established in Damascus repeats: sophisticated device, careful targeting, complete deniability. The Moghnia assassination's legal framework continues evolving through subsequent administrations. The Trump administration interprets imminent threat more broadly, authorizing the Soleimani strike based on historical pattern of attacks and general posture, rather than specific tactical intelligence of imminent operations. The Biden administration initially signals more restrictive interpretation, then continues authorizing strikes in Iraq and Syria against militia commanders linked to attacks on American forces. The precedent adapts to political context while maintaining core structure. Hezbollah's operational leadership after Moghnia proves competent but not transformational. His successors maintain organizational capability and continue developing attack plans, but they lack Moghnia's combination of tactical creativity and strategic vision. Intelligence analysts debate whether this reflects individual talent or organizational constraints. Perhaps Hezbollah's post-Moghnia security measures prevent leaders from developing the operational experience that made Moghnia effective. The more compartmentalized and security-conscious an organization becomes, the harder it is for individuals to gain the broad exposure that develops exceptional capability. The question of whether the Damascus operation was worth its cost has no definitive answer, because the counterfactual is unknowable. What attacks would Moghnia have orchestrated if he had lived? Would he have developed more sophisticated EFPs that killed more American soldiers? Would he have conducted the kind of international spectacular that defined his early career? Intelligence assessments suggest probability rather than certainty, and probability doesn't satisfy those who question whether any targeted killing achieves strategic objectives beyond removing individual actors. Syrian security in Damascus increases noticeably after February 2008, making subsequent Israeli operations more difficult. Surveillance detection routes become more sophisticated. Security services monitor hotels where foreigners stay more carefully. Vehicle checks increase in the diplomatic quarter. These measures don't eliminate Israeli intelligence presence in Damascus, but they force more careful tradecraft and longer development timelines for operations. The security improvements represent strategic cost. Damascus becomes less permissive environment for intelligence collection. The technical team that installed the device in Mugnie's vehicle receives no public recognition, and most remain anonymous even within intelligence circles. The operation succeeds partly because of their skill, but also because of luck. Syrian security could have detected the installation through random patrol. Building security could have noticed suspicious activity. Mugnie could have altered his pattern at the last moment. Successful operations always involve luck alongside planning, and Damascus had both. The archive of communications surrounding the operation's authorization remains classified, locked away in CIA and White House records under restrictions that prevent release for decades. Those documents would reveal internal debates about legal authority, risk assessment, and strategic value. They would show who advocated for the operation and who expressed reservations. They would demonstrate how the Bush administration weighed immediate tactical gain against long-term strategic cost. That historical record remains inaccessible, limiting public understanding of how democratic governments make targeted killing decisions. Here's what's certain. On February 13, 2008, Israeli intelligence removed one of the most capable terrorist operatives in modern history from the battlefield. The operation demonstrated technical sophistication, careful planning, and precise execution. It also triggered retaliation, increased security measures among adversaries, and created political complications when details eventually leaked. Whether those costs justified the tactical success depends on how you weigh removing individual capability against strategic consequences that persist for years. The Damascus operation proves that no location provides absolute sanctuary, that patient intelligence development eventually creates opportunity, and that technical precision can limit collateral damage enough to make politically sensitive operations viable. It also proves that successful operations don't necessarily achieve strategic objectives, that retaliation is inevitable, even if delayed, and that maintaining operational security becomes exponentially harder over time. Intelligence services continue studying the Damascus operation, not because it provides simple lessons, but because it illustrates the complexity of modern covert action. Does eliminating a high-value target actually disrupt an organization long-term? Or does it simply trigger adaptation that makes future targeting harder? When Hezbollah responds 4 years later with the Burgas bombing, does that validate or invalidate the decision to kill Mugnie? If the operation forces adversaries to implement security measures that degrade their effectiveness, is that a strategic win even without destroying the organization? These questions don't have obvious answers, which is why intelligence professionals continue debating them nearly 2 decades after the Damascus operation. What would you prioritize if you were designing the operation? Minimizing exposure risk for your operatives, ensuring zero civilian casualties, or maximizing the strategic disruption beyond just removing one individual? How would you balance those competing demands when each one creates operational constraints that reduce probability of success? Drop your take in the comments. Intelligence work is about making impossible choices with incomplete information, and there's never a perfect answer. If this breakdown gave you a different perspective on how modern covert operations actually work, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into intelligence history that changed the game.